I would like to start this recording by saying that I'm pretty sure Tier Maker has already failed me, considering the main attraction right here is Sonic Ranks or Sonic Girls Tier Maker. So I think they've already failed. 0 out of 10 website, guys. I think we can do better. Yeah. Hello, gamers and gamer girls and gamer things and gamer squids. I don't know. Welcome to the Deftones tier list. I've had a lot of time, and I mean probably a few months, to have an opinion permeated um, for all these albums. I've given all of them a fair listen, at least one or two times, and some I have basically been listening to nonstop. Some I have just been totally avoiding, not on purpose or anything, but just because I don't like them really. Um, there's a lot of albums. I think there's 10, no 9. They're working on their 10th or whatever. So I guess in the spirit of doing things the right way, I will just do this in order. Probably just because it's the easier way to do this, and I'll also make this bigger so it's a little bit easier to see. So, I hate to start with White Pony because it's probably one of the more controversial takes I have. I don't think White Pony is like the best Deftones album, and I know that some people are like, "Oh man, already disliking the video. Dude, how could you do this to me?" Sorry, I just don't entirely get it. Um, I think the album's great. Some of the moments on the album kind of confuse me, at least not confuse me, but just kind of throw me in a different direction that I wasn't exactly thinking of. Like when it came to this album, like for example, Back to School, even though it's technically not really a track, it's more of like a bonus track that's thrown at the front of the album. I don't really know how to feel about it. It's not my kind of thing when it comes to like Deftones. It's more centered around rap for that song specifically. The rest kind of center around your traditional Deftones album that you get like throughout this whole listing. Um Now, to be completely honest, this album really isn't that bad. Like I'll even just go ahead and like pull it up over here, like just to think about it and kind of think about how I feel about White Pony. It's pretty good front to back. Like you have I'm not the super fan of Etc. I'm actually okay. I'm leaning more towards Digital Bath right now, so that's kind of changing my opinion a little bit. Um and I am a super fan of Elite, Street Carp, Knife Party a little bit. And maybe not Knife Party so much, but Korea and Pig Maggot. Those are probably my favorites of the album. And the rest are good. They're just not, they're not bad. They're just not my kind of thing per se. Or at least that sound doesn't exactly appeal to me. This album, if I had to go based on every song in it, including Back to School, I'd put it in like top of A. And I know that's obviously probably not the best take I'll give on this channel, but I'm not, I'm not here to peddle something that I'm trying to just be like, oh, White Pony's my favorite album of all time. My God, like I actually adore parts of most of the album a lot. Some of it kind of falls off for me, but that's just kind of personal. Anyway, Adrenaline. Man, I wish I liked this album more, and I get why some people like it a lot because it's more traditional and it's way more rough and it's way more unclean, I'd say. And I could get behind that. It's just when I listen to a song like Fist, actually it's listed as Fist on Apple Music. I think it's first on Spotify. I don't know why it's listed as Fist here, but like literally look, Fist. I don't know why it's listed like that, but you know what? Whatever. Um Adrenaline's not my favorite album. I actually would probably go as far as to say it's my least favorite. It's probably a battle between if Adrenaline and Gore are my least favorite. Um, but it's not that good. I mean, parts of it really stick out, like Bored, obviously. Um, I'd say even Root. I'd give Root its own kind of uh, exemplary, just because it's a good song. And Adrenaline number 9 is probably my favorite song off that album. Period. Um, and of course, I don't think the rest of the songs are like terrible per se. It's just they're not exactly. They kind of seem like Deftones were taking a direction as a start, and it was just difficult because that's something you do when you're a band that's starting out. You have to take some risks. Just kind of like, well, how are we gonna make this? How are we gonna make this sound right? So they tried, and it's certainly a good effort, but it's not enough to make me like want to go back and listen to specific songs. Like I'll probably listen to Engine Number Nine and Bored occasionally. Like I'll listen to Engine Number Nine a lot, but not really anything else off this album. Around the Fur, I don't even want to talk about it too much, but I can also talk about why I have it here. Like Around the Fur is just something I've been listening to endlessly at this point. Like I've just like in between when I'm working, I'll usually throw on Be Quiet and Drive and Die the Flu on my handy little smartphone. I'll usually play that just because that's just my thing. But I extremely enjoy this album. Like I even give points to MX for just kind of being sort of brave. It's more linear of a song, and it kind of sounds flat in comparison to everything else on the album. Um, but it works. I mean, I actually think it's really interesting. And this album also has a hidden track, um, Zamone, and I think that's it. And also Bong Hit, but also that's not really a song so much as it is like a hidden thing in a track. Um, if we're including Damone, because it is a part of the official album, I think this album is perfect, or at least near perfect with what we have. Because MX could have been, something more ambitious as a closer, quote unquote. But I actually just think it's just the perfect album. I'm not really opposed to it being an S, like the top of S. Um, but yeah, it's just one of my favorites of all time, just because of how I don't want to say like it's not brave. It's not brave. I don't want to say it's not brave. It kind of sticks to a formula that works really well, and what they were doing on Adrenaline down here, and they just made it work like a million times better, at least in my opinion. That's why it's here. It's just one of my favorites, just because it works so well. Kind of what kept them afloat like during this era. So yeah, Diamond Eyes. I actually was just looking at this tier list before I was messing with it, and my original place for Diamond Eyes I believe was here or here, and that probably stands true today just because I've actually given it another chance and listened to it, and it's all right. I mean, it's not like it's kind of a little bit like Adrenaline, where there's certain tracks that stick out way more than others, and others kind of sound a little flat. Like they sound good to listen to. It's just I'm not a super fan of them. Like Diamond Eyes, for example, like just the starter track Diamond Eyes is good, but it's not one of my favorites just cuz it's kind of a weak starter. Um some things on the album don't really stick out to me that well, and I know people adore this album for a multitude of reasons. I mean, this had a lot of bonus tracks as well, and I'm not really going to count those in my rating here, even though, so it's a good album, I'd say. It's not like the best thing I've ever listened to, but it certainly helps that the album was a little bit more ambitious in changing direction because it's just so much more like a pop album. Not like a pop album, but it's more pop influenced, and it's just extremely like interesting as an album just because it's so a little bit more unique than the others because it takes a more general direction. I think it's just like bottom of A, like I thought originally, because it kind of still sounds the same to me. I haven't really changed my opinion on Diamond Eyes that much. I'm not a super fan of it, but it certainly could be like it could have had better moments, I think. Which I'll actually rate it just to keep the conversation about Diamond Eyes going, which I think is where Koi no Yokon did the right thing. It's not my favorite, and as I've listened to it, I've kind of heard some things in the album where I'm like, yeah, this kind of got old. Like thinking about Koi no Yokon, Swerve City is still probably one of my favorite songs of all time from it. Um, Leathers is has actually grown on me severely. Romantic Dreams has kind of fallen. I don't know. Like I'm not a super fan of it, but it's not. I don't think it's like super good anymore. Poltergeist has kind of fallen a little bit for me just because it's not that interesting now. Because you can, it's kind of like a one trick pony with command control on Diamond Eyes, but it's certainly still good. Like you know, it's refreshing to hear. It's refreshing to go back to and just be like, oh yeah, this is some good stuff. Tempest, Gauze, Rosemary, like this album has a lot more moments that stick out and make you think about it more. Like how Rosemary kind of ends on a more somber note. How Goon Squad kind of transitions out of that and it's just like, oh, back into the madness as a kind of finale almost before like what happened to you. Now it more takes what Diamond Eyes was doing and just decided, you know what? Make it a little thematic. Just kind of make it flow a little bit. And because it flows, in comparison to kind of how Around the Fur took a sound and really just ran with it and made it super good, Koi no Yokon has a multitude of things going on, and it really is dynamic enough to a point where it just turns into something beautiful. So that's why Koi is here. Deftones, the self-titled. I will say, I originally probably would have put Deftones here because I don't know what I was thinking, but probably because I didn't really like the sound of the album so much. It kind of sounded flat to me. Um, and in retrospect, I think now I enjoy it more, but it's certainly not one of my favorites. Like, I have, it's kind of again, like Adrenaline, yet again, where I have moments with it, and sometimes I'll be into it, like with what the album is presenting to me, but I won't exactly like fully want to listen to it. It's just kind of one of those weird things where the album is good, but some of it kind of sounds flat, almost like Adrenaline. And there's moments that stick out, but it just doesn't seem quite like what I was coming in expecting, you know? Like coming in, I went into these albums chronologically. So you can imagine it was a little confusing going from like Adrenaline, Around the Fur, White Pony, and then right into Deftones, and it's just kind of like, oh, that's a little bit more like depressing kind of and just and that's not a bad thing to say by the way. Like it's more drab, but it's definitely not a bad decision or way to go with the band like sound. I certainly think it's like bottom-ish of A just because like it could be more enjoyable, I'd say, if I was like more into that drab vibe of it. I kind of just like how I like more how these albums are more like a little bit more have more expression. They kind of have more life to them. I don't know. I don't want to say it's like this album's lifeless or something, but it doesn't pull me in enough to make it like a top of A or S tier kind of album. It's good. I just don't think it's my kind of thing personally. All right, Ohms. I've had a severe change of thought with this album. I think it's just like a B tier album at this point in relativity to Deftones and maybe everything else I've listened to. It's certainly not the worst, and I actually think some of the tracks that sound a lot more different than Deftones' normal spiel. It works pretty well, and like I actually enjoy listening to this album. Going back, I'm not a real big fan of listening to songs like individually or even the album as a whole. The album as a whole works well and kind of flows almost like Koi no Yokon a bit, like with how dynamic it is, but it more tones back and it kind of goes into that OG Deftones self-titled kind of vibe. And there's nothing wrong with it. I just kind of don't like listening to that kind of thing anymore. Like Pompeii is just not my thing. Spell Mathematics is good, but it's not like something so. It's not a song I like think about going back to, and that's a majority of the songs on this album, except like I guess the title track and This Link Is Dead. those are the only real songs that I consider going back to like regularly. I actually like This Link Is Dead and Ohms and like maybe sometimes Error and Ceremony, but never really anything else on the album. It doesn't really pull me in. Urantia is also good, and it might Urantia is almost the reason I want to bump this up to like here, but I'm kind of just on a firm B just because the album's existence isn't really pulling me in any specific way that like these would. Because at least with Deftones self-titled, it at least feels compelling, and it's kind of just it kind of feels like its own entity. Ohms doesn't really hit much of anything. It's just more of a it's its own it's not its own entity. It's just kind of like in the background and it's like, oh, there's that one too. Um yeah, not a bad album per se. It's just it's not my cup of tea anymore. Like I used to be more into it when I was getting into Deftones and I finished the discography and I was like, wow, this is actually pretty new and interesting. And now it's not really much of anything. I've had a lot of time to think about this, so that's why I'm doing this. Gore, it's really a fight for last place at this point, like for second to last place with these two albums. Just because I really don't know how to feel about Gore. Every time I've gone into listening to Gore, the recording just sounds flat. It doesn't sound quite like a Deftones album. And I get they were going a different direction in general as well, so that might also be playing into it. But it's certainly too much to where I'm just like, this throws me off. I don't want to listen to this just like out of the blue. It's not the album I go to when I'm considering Deftones, because when I'm considering showing someone Deftones, I think like these three albums mainly, for different reasons. Now, Gore has moments like with some of the songs that like some of the albums near the bottom. Hearts and Wires is actually a really good song. I think if they put it on like a project like Koi no Yokon, that would probably be a significantly good song on that. But the rest of it doesn't feel like it works. Like I just didn't really think about it much when I was listening to it, and even now when I try to go back and listen to it, it's just like it doesn't really work as well as they wanted it to, I guess. And obviously there's moments like I said, like Hearts and Wires and a little bit of Phantom Bride even. Um Prayers and Triangles is also pretty good. It's a good starter to the album, I will say that. But nothing else really stands out to me. Like I can't remember. I don't exactly remember how Doomed User and Acid Hologram sound because it's just like it's just somewhere in the back of my mind that I'm like I don't remember how this album went because it's so uninteresting. Like I don't know. Not really my thing. Compared to like Around the Fur, which I know like probably since after listening one or two times to the album, I knew how it went because it's so, and also Koi no Yokon, it's so distinct and it's so like interesting how it like shapes itself. I just don't feel that with Gore. I'm not a big fan, fortunately. And lastly, Saturday Night Rest. This is one of the first like albums that I was hellbent on being their best, at least when I was listening to the discography. I was also kind of on the fence with Koi no Yokon and Around the Fur. Like these three albums have been a constant for me. Like which is the best and why? And I think Saturday Night Wrist is up there, but it certainly has moments where it kind of falls through just because it doesn't quite know what it is. I don't know. Like, and of course, some of that ties into the band was all over the place for this album. So it kind of makes sense that it doesn't quite make sense as a Deftones album. In some ways, like with the Konami Code song, I guess something like I don't know, like Riviere, kinda, but not really. Um, the songs make sense to some degree. There's just some that kind of lead you in a different direction, like Pink Cell Phone, um, as well as the Konami Code song. Like sometimes it'll just be something like that throws me. Actually, I want to hear Xerxes again because I'm kind of like failing to remember what it's like. Okay, yeah, all right. Okay, I know now. All right, yeah. So this was like a more somber moment on the song on the album, I guess. Is it with Xerxes? 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 I don't know. That song, like that's another one part of the album that kind of throws you in a different direction. Um, Rats, Rats, Rats is also pretty distinct in how it sounds. It's a little flat, but it certainly is good. The rest of the songs, like also with Rapture, I know Rapture isn't really the most beloved song, but I actually kind of enjoy it. Like I don't know, sometimes I'll be listening to Saturday Night Roast and I'll be like, oh hell yeah, because that part of that part of the album comes on where it's just so heavy that it's ridiculous. But anyway, this album kind of achieves a lot in how it's dynamic with how it sounds, like Around the Fur, going to Yokon. This one kind of just uses tempo and uses like flow to its advantage just because by the end of the album it feels like you have gone on like a mountain, like a mountains and valleys worth of adventure with this album. I don't know, maybe not adventure is the word I'm looking for, but just with how much change you experience by the time you get to the end of the album. It's just insane. So that's why it's kind of S. I still think it's one of the best just because it's significantly better than like some of the things like consistency wise with the entirety of the album. It kind of sits up here just because it's so much more like flowing and just interesting. It's just kind of like artwork almost. Like he's up here. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm kind of rambling just because I want to talk so much about it, but I don't even know if that really makes sense. But yeah, this is Deftones. I don't know if this has changed much since I first rated Deftones. I assume it sort of has, but I really don't know to what extent. I feel like it's just been about the same, if not like I changed my mind a little bit with Deftones, self-titled, and I guess with Ohms because I kind of bumped it down a bit, but I don't know. I guess that's about where I would have it because yeah. But anyways, that's Deftones, boys. Thanks for watching and certainly being supportive of my stupid ass just sitting here and making tier lists. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm just really uh bored. So thanks for watching and I'll see you around.